Muito boa noite para todo mundo que está aqui nos acompanhando. É uma alegria ter todos vocês que se inscreveram e estão aqui hoje para ouvir a Ellen Naylor, né? Que é uma expert em Win and Loss Analysis. A gente está, então, no 4º seminário SCIP SPM, já na segunda noite. Eu sou Luciana Florencio, sou professora, atualmente coordenadora do mestrado profissional em comportamento do consumidor. E juntamente com o mestrado que a gente vem tendo essa parceria com a SCIP já há 4 anos, uma parceria muito bacana, e que tem permitido a nós não só esse diálogo com o pessoal do IC, né, da Inteligência Competitiva, mas também é um espaço para a gente apresentar as nossas dissertações, as dissertações dos alunos. Então, o evento tem sido sempre em 2 dias, onde em um dia a gente faz a apresentação dessas dissertações, sempre tentando dialogar aí com a inteligência competitiva, inteligência de mercado, e foi o que aconteceu na noite de ontem, né? E hoje, então, a gente tem, normalmente na segunda noite, né, a gente traz aí profissionais para trazer um tema sempre que é pesquisado, né, junto com o pessoal de IC, e que é sempre um tema que a gente pensa que seja atual, né, para essa discussão e diálogo. Então, a gente está muito feliz com a presença da Ellen hoje, nessa noite, e eu queria agradecer muitíssimo, né, a todo o esforço, né, da Vera de poder realizar e conseguir todo esse processo, né, de trazer a Ellen para junto de nós nessa noite. Agradecer a presença do Alexandre, né, que será o nosso moderador. Enfim, agradecer a todo mundo que está presente nessa noite e agradecer muitíssimo a presença da nossa pró-reitora, a Cristina Helena, que está aí também para prestigiar esse evento. Obrigada, Cris. Bom, rapidinho, queria contar um pouco para vocês. Então, depois a Vera fala um pouquinho sobre a noite de hoje. Ontem, então, a gente teve a apresentação de 2 alunos que, na verdade, se formaram esse ano, já são mestres do mestrado profissional em comportamento do consumidor, que foi a Adriana e o André. E essa apresentação foi gravada, na noite de ontem foi gravada, e aí a gente vai subir no YouTube do MPCC, que depois eu deixo aqui para vocês o endereço. E como a Cris falou, a gente também tem um canal dentro da SPM com vários vídeos dos diversos webinars que foram feitos ao longo aí do ano, e foram vários mesmos, viu? Então, vale a pena checar o canal também do YouTube da SPM, tá bom? Então, rapidinho aqui apresentar um pouquinho do mestrado. O mestrado profissional já tem 5 anos, então a gente já está com o edital aberto, né? E é um edital que os processos seletivos vai até janeiro de 2021, então tem tempo ainda, mas a gente sabe que sempre tem muita dúvida a respeito sobre o mestrado profissional, né? Sobre quais as diferenças de um mestrado profissional para um mestrado acadêmico, sobre um lato. Então, a gente sempre faz encontros com a coordenação, e em geral são 3 encontros, e o primeiro deles será no dia 26/10, semana que vem. Então, será um prazer recebê-los. Para quem gosta e quer conhecer mais, né, sobre o mestrado profissional e saber mais sobre o MPCC, será um prazer recebê-los. Se você souber de alguém que quer fazer mestrado, por favor, indique. Eu vou depois passar para vocês o link aí, para vocês conhecerem um pouquinho mais. E é isso, pessoal. Então, agradeço bastante e já passo aqui, então, a palavra para Vera. Aliás, deixa eu só fazer um comentário. A gente teve, a Vera sabe disso, né? Nesses últimos anos, a gente tem tido candidatos advindos desses encontros. Então, a gente sabe que é muito bacana tem sido muito bacana essa interação com a SCIP. Legal. Então, é isso, Vera, tá com você. Mas vou deixar você, acho que você tem que compartilhar uma tela, né? Deixa eu parar aqui.
Sim. Todos enxergando? Minha tela está aí, não?
Não, só a sua imagem.
Are you ready for me to start now or no?
Oh. No, Vera is going to present SCIP first.
Okay.
Is it okay? Okay. Bom, Eu sou a Vera Vieira, estou representando aqui os meus colegas do Comitê Executivo da SCIP Brasil, que estão atuando este ano aqui pelo capítulo Brasil da SCIP. Então, falando rapidamente da SCIP Internacional, a SCIP é uma associação de profissionais, uma associação sem fins lucrativos, que foi fundada nos Estados Unidos em 1986. Ela reúne profissionais de inteligência competitiva, inteligência de mercado, estratégia e áreas correlatas, que atuam em empresas, como empregados das empresas, como funcionários, podem ser também consultores, provedores de soluções, pessoal da academia e também de governos. A principal missão da SCIP é promover o conhecimento e as boas práticas no exercício da atividade e acompanhar também a evolução dessa atividade ao longo dos anos. E isto ela consegue entregar através da membresia, que tem diversos tipos de benefício. Um que eu reputo importantíssimo é o network internacional. E como vocês vão ver no próximo slide, a SCIP está presente em vários países do mundo, na verdade, em todos os continentes. Além desse benefício do network internacional, existe o acesso privilegiado a webinars, os workshops, as publicações e os diversos arquivos que são postos à disposição dos membros. Como vocês veem, a SCIP está no mundo todo, ela está presente em vários continentes. E sempre na forma de capítulos, em cada país. E hoje nós temos aqui duas pessoas que representam, que já foram e são líderes de capítulos. No caso, a Ellen Naylor é líder do capítulo americano do Colorado, e o Alexandre Del Rey, que foi nosso presidente, vai fazer a moderação da sessão de perguntas e respostas. Falando então da SCIP Brasil especificamente, ela existe desde 2009. Em 2014, ela foi reconhecida como o maior e o mais ativo capítulo do mundo. E a sua missão, tal qual a SCIP, é repercutir e propor discussões relevantes para a comunidade de inteligência competitiva, de mercado e estratégia no Brasil. E isso acontece por meio de diversos tipos de realizações. Um deles são os eventos, que nós vimos fazendo já há 10 anos, estamos no 11º ano, e as pesquisas periódicas sobre a atividade de inteligência competitiva no Brasil. A última pesquisa data de 1 ano, e ela focalizou a configuração da atividade de inteligência no Brasil e as dores dos profissionais de inteligência. Os que tiverem interesse em receber a apresentação dessa pesquisa, que foi feita o ano passado, num evento como esse, podem deixar o seu e-mail no chat, que nós enviaremos. Nós somos todos voluntários na SCIP Brasil. E da mesma forma que na membresia, nós temos vários benefícios dessa atividade. Uma delas, novamente, é o networking. É também o exercício de habilidades e competências exigidas nos diversos tipos de atividades que nós temos, o aprendizado que a gente tem no convívio, na troca de experiências com os colegas, e também o acesso privilegiado a vagas no setor de inteligência no Brasil. Eu deixo, então, 2 convites para vocês. O primeiro é conhecer melhor a SCIP e as diversas categorias de membresia e se aprofundar nos benefícios desta membresia. E em relação à SCIP Brasil, eu deixo esse link, que vai estar também no chat, referente à admissão de voluntários, esperando que aceitem o nosso convite, os 2 tipos de convites. Então, falando um pouco da nossa ilustre palestrante, a Ellen Naylor, Ellen é uma das pioneiras em inteligência competitiva e o win-loss analysis dos Estados Unidos. É uma pesquisadora especializada em fontes primárias, em fontes humanas, e, como tal, adora ouvir histórias das pessoas. Seu trabalho em mais de 30 anos de experiência reflete paixão pela análise de dados. E a experiência específica em vendas lhe ensinou que os clientes, as nossas vendas ganhas, e os prospects, as vendas que nós perdemos para a concorrência, são uma fonte preciosa de informação sobre produto, mercado e concorrência. Daí, a sua obra premiada, Win-Loss Analysis, How to Capture and Keep the Business You Want, além de outros tantos livros escritos a pedido da SCIP e que estão disponíveis para os membros da SCIP. Sua atividade na SCIP é intensa. Ela foi membro da SCIP, membro do board da SCIP, palestrante em diversos eventos e, como disse, é líder do capítulo Colorado nos Estados Unidos. Ela também recebeu o prêmio Fellow and Catalyst da SCIP por sua liderança e suas contribuições no campo da inteligência competitiva.
Que deu certo, aparentemente. Resta saber se
Ellen,
as amostras.
a warm welcome to the SCIP ESPM webinar.
Processo, assim que
Thank you.
a sua órbita e apontar a antena para a Terra,
How about if I
melhorar
share my...
essas imagens.
Unmute, yes. And share screen.
Ellen, I think that your microphone is active right now. If you could join us and start your presentation, will be a pleasure.
Okay, let me see if I can share my screen. That's what I'm trying to do right now.
I think that I need to stop the sharing with...
Vera, isso, a Vera
Oh,
tem que-
right. You're right.
Okay, I already did that.
Okay, so I can go back and share my screen. Okay, we got it. I think we got it. Share screen, share screen. Ah, I hit the wrong share screen. Now we got it. Okay. All right, so today we're going to talk about win-loss analysis, and thank you for the very nice introduction, Vera. Vera and I have known each other for years. She's wonderful and very smart, so I'm always enjoying being around Vera. Wish we lived a little closer.
And if you don't mind, Ellen, to put your presentation in the presentation mode would be great.
Oh, right, you're right. So true. What am I thinking about? Okay. Now, to get all this stuff out of the way, there we go. Slideshow from the beginning. Okay, thank you. That's why we have to have moderators like you, to keep us speakers in check here. Okay. All right, now. Okay, now I got myself off here so we can just look at the screens. All right, page down. Let's see if page down works here. Oh, it does. Okay. So what we're going to do today this evening is 7 things. We're going to start out with the difference between win-loss and surveys. I'm going to share some statistics with you that will help you talk your executives into saying yes to win-loss, some benefits, and I'll go through this 12-step win-loss process that I went into in my book with some other points since my book. 3 issues you want to consider when you're doing win-loss, 1 key myth of win-loss, and where to feed win-loss results, because a lot of people don't think about all the places it can go, right? So what is win-loss analysis? I understand more than half of you are doing it, so chances are you know what it is. But the idea behind it is you call your customers up, and those who chose your solution and those who did not choose your solution, and basically find out why, and whatever questions you want answered. How was decision making made? The competition, what do the competition have to say? How does the competition tell your customers about you? Are the customers understanding what it is that how you're trying to portray your company versus maybe they don't, or you find out about features they'd like to have or features they would never use that you have. You find out about a lot, especially when you use elicitation skills and just let them talk. And a survey really is, and it's conversational. You'll have questions you want answered, but it is a conversational approach. A survey tends to be very fixed and not flexible and, you know, fill in the blanks kind of thing. It's not necessarily conversational either. And the beauty of win-loss is it is conversational. And I always tell people, okay, these are the questions you have, but it could be that the customer won't know the answer to all these questions, but they might know the answer to some other questions you don't even know to ask, that they tell you some things that are more important. Like with one I had, they told me about a product that the customer should be offering. And we went into great detail about it all. And that went to product development, and they're now offering that product. So you just never know where these are going to go. Objectives of win-loss analysis really is to win more business. The bottom line is become more profitable, retain more business. And then you'll have specific goals that you'll be going after, not just a corporate directive. Okay, this thing doesn't advance very well. All right. So why isn't it done? It's a good question. A lot of people aren't aware of it, or they think they're doing it because they're talking to sales, and we'll go into why that's just a limited solution. Politics, some people don't do it because it wouldn't fly in their company, or they don't think their customers would answer to the win-loss interview. They wouldn't agree to it. Cost, of course, is always an issue. It's not free, whether you outsource it and you pay a consultant or you have people in-house doing it versus other things you'd rather have them do. Lacking executive sponsorship is always a big one too, because sometimes the win-loss program gets started out and then there's a reorg and it gets stopped. The other thing, it's simply not for everyone. It's some cultures, it just doesn't work. I know I was at a SCIP conference some years ago, and it was a big US company, and the gentleman told me, we can't do win-loss analysis. Our customers will not cooperate. And that's just how it can be. So here's some ideas about, wait a minute, this thing keeps advancing strangely. Here we go. All right. So this is more about why you want to do win-loss and not necessarily use sales, because only 40% of the time, especially for losses, and that's what this chart is about, not wins. For losses, 40% of the time only do they get it right. 32% of the time it's wrong. And 28% of the time they have the partial answer. And this comes from a book called From a Good Sales Call to a Great Sales Call by Richard Schroeder of Inova Research. And this is something to definitely keep in mind. So here's another statistic to help your executives agree to win-loss analysis. Taking formal win-loss program, taking action from it, can improve your win rates 15 to 30%. Now, this doesn't happen right away. This happens over time, obviously, after just one quarter's worth or so. But after a year or so, people tend to notice the difference, right? Also, it helps with retention, but I have not seen any statistics, so I can't share them with you. Here's another one I just picked up today from Pragmatic Marketing's 2019 annual survey. They surveyed, close to 2,500 people, and only 68% of them don't do win-loss, basically. And that's a big number. So you're at a competitive advantage if you're doing it. So here are some of the strategic benefits of doing win-loss. I think the early warning system is really a good one. Probably one of the key ones that a lot of people think about. If you're in technology, the right marketing alliances in particular, and it helps with forecasting. It can help. And trends against certain competitors. What's happening? How are we being represented? And I know in our case, when I was with Bell Atlantic, now Verizon, we even used it to do an acquisition. We used win-loss results that a consultant had collected for years to help us sell our board on an acquisition we wanted to have happen. And we figured if we used win-loss results, the ego of the executive in charge would not be disturbed because he realized, oh, this is what the customer's saying, not us, you know? So, and then the tactical benefits are much more obvious, you know. You really find out why you're winning or losing for real, not just what sales tells you. It's not price when they lose, and it's not their wonderful relationship when they win. Although relationship is really a big deal, especially in technology sales, I'm learning. And the last one is walking from bad prospects. Over time, you learn from win-loss what's a good prospect and what isn't. And so sales isn't wasting their time. Also, marketing isn't wasting their time trying to market to bad prospects. They target their marketing to the customer who's more apt to buy. So I'm going to go through these steps. I have these in my book, but I'll go through them in more detail. But you know, you're starting out with what are your goals? Why are you doing this? You should have a specific goal for what you're trying to do. I have a client right now who's in this, we're just starting our relationship, and it's actually in their smaller business marketing area. And they're really trying to figure out how to get their customers to agree to their product. Some of them just jump right in and others just stay where they're at. And they're also suspecting that perhaps sales is saying they're staying where they're at when they're actually going with a competitor. So that's kind of their goal. So therefore, which accounts do you go for? I think that just rolls right out of what your goals are. And your company culture, what is it? And also, what is the company culture of those you're targeting? You know, you want to be sensitive to both. Creating the questions, that takes a while, and you don't want to be doing that just with sales and marketing. Ideally, product marketing and management. You need to be thoughtful about these questions. And of course, you can always try them out. And if they don't work, you can always adjust them over time. Connecting with sales, connecting with the customer and interview customers. I'm going to spend a little more time there. They're the most challenging 3 steps, actually, I think, because sales, well, you know, you're meant to get information often today from salesforce.com, and it's not always accurate, shall we say. Connecting with customers, that's another big one with all the stress of today. And are people willing to take the time to talk to you? And I've kind of learned if they are, they're actually quite chatty. But some of them are too nervous, you know, with the COVID going on and the politics going on globally. And, you know, people are very disturbed by this, and there's a high amount of stress. And you need to keep that in mind when you're connecting with customers and interviewing them. It's a big deal. Tallying, and so you have to have more empathy than you did previously. Tallying the interview results, I mean, that just comes right out of the interviews. I include it as a step, but it's kind of a no-brainer. And analyzing the findings, telling the story back to whoever it is asking for it. What did you learn? Make it as easy as you can for them to follow it, and learn how they like to be presented to. What's the best way for them to see the results? And definitely make recommendations based on what you've learned. Because if you don't, you're wasting an opportunity, right? Disseminate, decide who to disseminate it to, and be careful. You don't need to disseminate this quite so deeply, but perhaps quite widely across functions, and really to those who need to know. And lastly, make changes. If you don't make changes, then you've wasted all this time and money. So goals, what are your goals? Why are you doing this? Why are you spending the time or the money to do this? You know, are you losing market share in a certain area or trying to gain market share? Are sales really growing quite quickly in one area but not in another? Is there a certain market segment you're trying to go after? Those are all good goals to have. I've also had people come to me and say it's a corporate directive, and I'm like, that's really, you're not going to get much out of your program if it's a corporate directive. You'll save your job, but you should be wanting to learn something new that you don't know today. Actionable intelligence, as we all like to say. So then the accounts should roll right out of that. And what you need to keep in mind, this is some practical advice to give you, is how many of these customers are you really going to be able to get through? You know, by the time you go through the whole process, will you get through to half of them, 30% of them, 20% of them, 80% of them? You need to think about that. How responsive do you think they're going to be to a phone call or a Zoom call these days, right? And how do you want to approach them, right? So you'll need to have more accounts than obviously the number you want to get. And the company culture, yours and theirs. And part of the company culture is, you know, the politics, who's going to support you and who isn't. How about sales? Is sales going to feel threatened by this process? Sometimes sales is so threatened that they talk companies out of even doing win-loss. And the same thing goes for your customers. While your customers all have their own culture, you might be able to break it down somewhat, though, by the industry they're in, for example. So you just want to be sensitive to these things and try to foresee this rather than finding out while you're interviewing the customer when it's a little bit on the late side. You want to be sensitive to it and think of it right up front. And, you know, it'll influence you also on how you want to reach out to your customers to set up these win-loss interviews. So creating the questions, this is something you want to do very thoughtfully, as I mentioned right up front. These are the 4 areas that I tend to qualify these questions under, but everybody has, the questions depend on what your goals are, right? To achieve through your win-loss. But I think it's good to be balanced and also to do both wins and losses. Some customers say, oh, we just want to do losses. And I'm like, you're going to get an unbalanced answer if that's all you're going after. How are you going to find out how well you're really doing? How good your customer service is if all you're doing is talking to losses? They don't know about your customer service. They'll tell you about the competitors perhaps, but not yours. So you get an unbalanced perspective of what's going on if you just want to do losses. And connecting with sales, well, you know, that's kind of a big deal. I like to talk to the salesperson actually, or connect with them somehow, whatever the culture of the company is, before I reach out to their customer. I want to know what the scoop is. I want to know the likelihood. And I also want them to introduce me to their customer if they're willing to do that. A lot of salespeople are, once you've had a conversation with them, but not all. And the sales game has really changed. This is probably old news, but you know, everybody researches these days. So a lot of times the customers and potential customers have done so much research on your product and or services that they feel like they know more practically than the salesperson does about your product or service. Well, you know, they've gotten their data from a lot of different sources out there on the internet and social media and some of those sites that do assessments of various companies, products, and services as well. But as you know, being good competitive intelligence professionals, not all that information is accurate or timely. So a lot of times what sales has to do is undo some of the damage of what the person has heard. And so their job actually is pretty difficult that way, because the customer's almost made up their mind a lot of times. They have a bias before they even call sales up, even more than they ever have before. So connecting with customers and prospects, this is a really key step. And I think it's the biggest challenge for me today doing win-loss because of COVID, because of people working out of their home. You have to get cell phones, right? Mobile telephones numbers instead of the office number, because most people aren't having them forwarded. But you also need to think about why they want to talk to you today in a different way than you did before. And I had someone contact me telling me they only got through 2% of the time, and here's the note that they wrote. I mean, market research request? What kind of a title is that? Delete, right? And this person had just said, my name is such and such. I've been hired to do post-deal research for a company in the paper business. They don't say who the company even is. So already there's a red flag if they've opened it up to start out with. Looks like you were involved in a deal lately. Want to help out? there's nothing in it for the customer to help you out. Why do they want to help you out? Okay, they were involved in a deal lately. What's in it for them? You know, this is an opportunity for you to tell us how it went, right? What you liked about us, what you didn't. We like to improve our customer relationships, and this is why we do this. You know, these are the sorts of things you need to include in an email to have a higher success rate, and you need to do often enough, send it out more than once, and you need to have their cell phone number because often enough it gets stuck in spam too. Now, ideally, if the salesperson's going to introduce you, they can send the letter out and copy you on it. And if that's the case, then you won't get stuck in spam. But sometimes they don't. They're not willing to do that. And so I send the letter out and copy the salesperson, but sometimes it gets stuck in spam. So you need to have a phone number so you can call them in case they've never even seen any of this. And I've had that happen even as recently as earlier this year. And somebody answered their phone and was all set to take the interview. I wasn't all set. Fortunately, I had a bad connection and had to call them back, which really saved me. So you just never know. So interviewing customers and prospects. I have down here, know me before you call me. I always like to look people up on LinkedIn. This is a place where you can use your elicitation skills, which I'll be going into a little bit more in a chart or two. Find something in common with them, or learn a little more about the industry or their background, or something you're impressed with about them, or offering them some information. You know, just figure that out before you contact them, especially after you've contacted them and they've agreed to the interview, right? So also pre-interview, this is what I like. I like to get a certain amount of information from sales or Salesforce, whichever it is, just to kind of get an idea of, because there's so many things that get lost on the way. Win-loss is a process, and you're paid in dividends if you actually can be organized. So the more you can know ahead of time, the better. And this is really enough, you know. A short deal summary can be one line, but just to get some idea of, and also a lot of times they'll forget to give you the information you need, like their cell phone number and their email and what their job title is, because you want to go look them up on LinkedIn as well, right? Okay, so I understand that there's some interest in elicitation, and I often use it particularly at the beginning of a win-loss call. And I'll start out with mutual interest. You know, you'll look them up and you'll find out you have something in common with them, like a hobby or an interest, or you're in the same industry, you've worked at the same company, schooling, whatever it is. Or simple flattery. I know I started one out. This woman looked quite young and was very accomplished and knew 5 languages. And I started out the interview flattering her. And it was a very good interview. It was the last interview I had before COVID on March 13th of this year. Naive mentality, that's another good one. But naive doesn't mean stupid. It means you've done some homework, but you don't know as much as they do. So you need their help. And this comes in really handy, for example, when you're doing some technology interviews and they're starting to go really into some technology on you, and maybe it's a little over your head, or you're asking them about their ecosystem. You know, how does this solution fit in with your ecosystem? That's a really good time to have the naive mentality, so you get a really good explanation of how your solution or the competitor's solution, as the case might be, was meant to work in their ecosystem. This is so helpful for product development, right? Quid pro quo, that is, you give them something, you know, and they give you something back. And a lot of times you might give them something back about some product development, product development plans your company has, you know, just something that they might not already have, but something that you know your company is okay with you sharing. Purposefully erroneous statement. I don't use this as much in win-loss as I do just in regular interviews. When I've been told someone is a real expert, and then I figure they really aren't by how they're answering the questions, or just the conversation, the way it's going, I'm thinking, I was told this person was excellent, but gee, I don't think so. And so a lot of times I'll say something that I know is wrong, and it's big time wrong. And if they don't correct me, then I realize, oh, they really aren't very knowledgeable, as it turns out. And I'll thank them, and the call will be a lot shorter. Then the provocative statement, that's kind of fun to do as people are telling you something. And you're like, really? And unbelieving is very similar, something that to get them a little excited about things. And it works in particular with people who are a little more excitable. And you can tell as you're talking to them that that's the case. Ooh, quid pro quo. I put that in twice. Okay, complaining. Everybody seems to love to complain. So you can always find something to complain about, right? Like the price. And bracketing is something you always put towards the end of your interview, whether it's a win-loss interview or any other type. And that is, you're asking about pricing or someone's age or whatever. And, was it 20%, 10 or 20% more expensive, versus getting an actual number, or the age between 40 and 50, just thinking about that, getting a little further. I notice a lot of times people will just tell you anyway, by the time you get that far into the interview, you've become friends, right? And silence is by far my favorite. I feel like it's such a sign of respect. How many times have we been in meetings and people ask, oh, are there any questions? No? Okay, well, go ahead. It's really a good thing to do. And a lot of times too, you'll just get people to talk a little more than they would have because they're not comfortable with that silence also, which I'm totally comfortable with it because I'm more of an introvert. So it's fine with me. So the next step is just tallying the results from all these interviews. Just organize it. Once again, it's a big organization project. Some people have software to do it. However it works best for you is how you do it, right? And here's some examples of what people do. This is one from one of my friends, just showing some results of the findings, kind of showing reasons. The left side's losing and the right side's winning, and he's even got it color coded. The red is losing and the green light is winning, and just showing what the percentages are of these wins and representing them with a bar chart. It's a really nice little, I think it's a really nice little way of having an executive summary of the whole win-loss project. Some people find this a little challenging to look at, so that's what you need to think about as well. This is a lot here. So then here's just a simple chart, reason for the win or loss. Some people like presentations like this, where you just show lots of different charts like this. And in some cases too, you want to walk people through this rather than just send out the presentation. And when you're putting your presentation together, you need to ask that question. Am I going to have an opportunity to go over this with you? Or are you just going to be passing this around to everybody? Because if that's the case, you need to include more detail in the notes section or somewhere so that they understand. Since you're not there to answer their questions and to explain things a little better. There's only so much you can do with the chart, right? And here's another thing I know I've done. Just to do a simple, at the very end of all the analysis, what is it that really came out, of strengths and weaknesses? And so I just sort of listed them for this customer. Great customer service, bad customer references, sales professionalism, sales too pushy, and I went through each of these as well. And interestingly enough, this company, this was a number of years ago, had no white papers on their website. And so one of the customers that told me I had to go to a competitor's website to really understand this product better, but I liked this company, the one who had hired me, I liked their product better. So some people really like this. So you need to ask about this, right? And what's kind of nice about this is you can have a discussion and come up with some actions. How can we train our sales not to be too pushy? Why is it they're like this? What are the features that are weak? Oh, we don't integrate well enough. Who is it we need to integrate with to make more sales? I wonder how much that would cost. Just getting into the details of what we should do about this. So recommendations, speaking of what we should do about this, you always want to have recommendations. Otherwise, it's not actionable intelligence. Dissemination. I think it's really important to be careful who you disseminate this with all the people coming and going in companies these days. There's there's no company loyalty these days. I'll just say that. So you need to disseminate it to those who need to know on a deeper level. I always like to get back to the salesperson when I'm doing win-loss to let them know how it went on an individual level. And what that does is it creates really goodwill. And over time, the win-loss program, there's more cooperation with that. But the actual report, I let the company decide who should have it. But I always caution people that there's a lot of really proprietary information in here. And I don't use a software to do this myself. I use my critical thinking. I have not found a software that really replaces that, so it takes me quite a while to put it together, but I think it's more worthwhile. And making changes, obviously, if you're not willing to make the changes, then you've wasted a lot of time. And the challenge there is, though, having worked in corporations myself, is to make those changes, right? Because you've identified what they are, but you're not empowered to make those changes as a CI professional. So, you need to have good positioning cross-functionally to make this work. So some considerations that you need to think of. One is, do you disclose who the company is? Some people don't, some people do. I think it's a much better idea to disclose the company, whether you're doing the win-loss yourself or you're outsourcing it. Obviously, you have to when you outsource. Well, you don't have to, but it's a really good idea. And the reason why is, it's hard to get people's trust enough today with what all is going on in the world and with how busy the inbox is for everybody. If you're not willing to disclose who the company is, I don't think your results are going to be very, very forthcoming, as in people aren't going to agree to those interviews. Those who really like the idea of not disclosing the company say the answers are more neutral, and that's probably true. However, people are biased when they make a buying decision, so I don't mind that bias because that is the bias they use when they decide who they're going to select, right? In-house versus third party, you need to decide which way you'd rather do this. Obviously, in-house, nobody knows your products and services like you do. On the negative, the customer might rather hear from a third party than talk to somebody in-house. They might be less comfortable with that. But of course, the third party isn't going to do it for free. But in-house, it isn't free either, right? Your staff decides how you're going to spend your time. And the security thing, I can't underscore this enough. I know we're in an era today of transparency where people like to share stuff. I don't think this is something that you want to share with as many people. I know there's a lot of discussion. Other people don't agree with me on that, but there's enough stuff floating around that you don't want to get out of your company without this being another one on that list. And win-loss programs are quick to implement. This is a myth. They are not quick to implement. If people tell you they can finish them very quickly, you have to suspect, because the steps I just went through with you, learning your industry, or just learning the facts about your industry, how the sale is made. Anybody worth their salt is going to want to see a demo who does win-loss, because they want to know what the customer experience is, right? That takes time right there. Then you create the questions, you try them out, and you have to get through sales, which accounts they're going to be, all those steps, that takes time. And then of course you got to get on the customer's calendar if they say yes. Then you got to conduct the interview. The rest of it's pretty quick, writing it up, but that beginning part can take a while and you can't rush it. You'll be unprofessional. If you're trying to reach someone 5 or 6 times a day to get that interview in with caller ID, they can see that. Or with the email. And they're really turned off by people who do that. I know I sure am, but I've heard other people tell me that as well. Another myth, I think, is industry expertise. unless you're really in a very high-tech industry like pharmaceuticals and some of the health sciences and some of the, say, chemical things that are really, really, most people can learn your industry enough to do win-loss interviews. What's more important is that they do win-loss interviews, that they understand how business is decided. They understand how customers' decisions are made. They understand the business of decision-making. They understand product development. They understand business, marketing, sales. The industry expertise is like gravy. The other thing about industry expertise that concerns me a little bit is when people say they always work in this space. They're apt to be blindsided and to say, yes, this is how we do it. If you bring people in that have different industry expertise, they'll actually come up with some fresh ideas for you, even in creating the questions. So it's just something to keep in mind. So this is the last section of my presentation, and that is feeding the win-loss results. Because a lot of times people are just, they don't really take advantage of all the places where you can feed the information of your win-loss analysis into your company. And I'm going to go into each one of these in a little more detail. So let's start out with the buyer journey. Customer testimonials, always good. I know I have interviewed some customers and gotten back to my customer and said, my goodness, this guy would be a great customer testimonial if you don't already have him or her on the list. And putting together relevant videos, you get an idea about that. Of course, white papers, you get ideas of things to include in those white papers. Website changes based on things you hear that they don't care about, for example, or that turn them off. Social media, of course, the annual report, you can include some of the things you learn in win-loss in the annual report. Sales, of course, battle cards. And sales loves this. And this is one of the ways you can sell sales on doing win-loss, is to let them know, listen, you're going to get so much more information to help you make sales out of this process. This is not a process by which you're going to lose your job. That's up to you and your sales manager. What we're trying to do here is learn from the customer how they're perceiving, how you're doing as a company holistically. And look at all these things you're going to get out of it. Marketing communications, also, if you're in touch with Marcom, they can get great material for advertising when they look at some of the trends that are happening in the marketplace. You can help them develop buying personas. They just love this. All companies seem to be trying to do this these days. Win-loss feeds into that just beautifully. It can reinforce it. It can also come up with new personas that you hadn't thought about, you know? Of course, marketing collateral and other communication channels that you hadn't thought of, even distribution. Training. You train the trade show collectors and the trade show exhibitors on your products, obviously, but the competition, what they're saying, and make them more aware of the competition might be coming to your booth. Maybe you want to qualify who's talking to you before you talk to them. And part of employee onboarding, some of this competitive stuff you get in particular, and of course, sales. Training for new salespeople, new reps, and training every now and again. We used to present at the annual sales conference, how they have those every year or every quarter. We would add some things we had learned about the competition. They loved it because they didn't know about it. And then over time, they started telling us stuff we didn't know about. So it was a real win-win. And product development, that's a big one. Almost every time I do this, I learn more about product development. What's interesting, though, is some of the technology clients I have lately have resented my product development ideas, and that the fact that the reason the customer chose a competitor, it was really all about relationship, Ellen. It wasn't about our features. So you get some of that, too, when you present your findings to some clients, and that can always be interesting, too. Of course, the relationship's very important in these big sales, but so are the features. They got to be able to have the thing work the way it would work best with their infrastructure, their ecosystem. So, and strategy. partners, alliances, like I was mentioning earlier, we at Verizon, we acquired the installed base of Northern Telecom many years ago. They're not even in business anymore. They were most recently called Nortel, but this was many years ago. And we used win-loss analysis findings. And, you know, you need to be creative when you're using win-loss findings as to how to share them with your company. Pardon me?
Oi, linda. É 052.
É isso.
Não lembro.
052
Não lembro.
880-698-08.
Tomando biscoito.
Menina, eu comecei.
Can you please, yes.
Okay, so I just finished strategy before this happened, I think. So just the last thing was, oops, it's not working. I had one last one, which was the company, your reputation. These are areas also, especially customer service and customer training that come out of this a lot of times, or that your communication's not effective and people are misconstruing it, and your maintenance. So these are just a lot of ideas for you to work with, and this is not advancing. There you go. And I have concluded my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
This was a great presentation, Ellen. I think that win-loss is one of the most depth technique that we could use to understand our customer, and you presented very well how anybody could start a program in a very good manner from the beginning to the end. This is great, and we have a lots of questions here, Ellen. I would like to start with one of my own, with the help of Vera, that we are reading your blog and saying that a recommendation that you say. And one of the most difficult things that I would like to hear from you is how we get the opportunity to have this conversation to the customer. Do you have any hint or any kind of a suggestion for us to get the time for the customer in order that he can open, especially those that are those that we lost the opportunity? Can you share some ideas of how you get the attention of the customers in order that you get the conversation?
Well, there's two things I do. Number one is I have the account executive introduce me. Unless the account executive had a very bad experience, which that happens sometimes. But it does in these bigger sales in particular, there's a rapport, even though we lost the business. There's a rapport that's developed between sales and that customer. I know some of these that I've dealt with, they're going on for 6 months or even up to a year and a half to close a deal. Those are the easiest losses to get into, when the salesperson says, hi, I would like to introduce you to Ellen Naylor. And, you know, right at the very beginning of the email, you'll say something like, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to present our solution. And we really appreciated that, and we understand you've decided to go with another provider. You know, that way they know you're also not trying to sell to them. You're just trying to get a little time with them. And also we often like to learn from our lost business how we can be better in the future. A lot of times they'll go for that if they're a decent human being. Some people just aren't, and they aren't going to do it. You know, they aren't going to go for it. But to think of what's in it for them. And also, when you're talking to the account executive, you might even ask them, hey, you know this guy or this lady, you know, what do you think would make them want to talk to me? You know, how receptive do you think they'd be towards having a conversation? What do you think would make them want to talk to me? Ask the account executive. I do that a lot too. One size doesn't fit all, so you need to think about individualizing your notes to people. But
No, in this sense, I think that you touch a point that you recommend to a third person to do this discussion, not to the sales team in this case specifically.
Especially not sales. Within your company, though, people that do CI can do these interviews. People that are in product management can do these interviews. You know, they're perfectly capable of it. If there are people who like to interview, you know, and have that experience. But people outside the company, that's all we do is interview. So we're usually better at it, but not always. You know, there's people within the company who are good at it too. So, you know, you need to decide. It's a very individual decision, I think, you know, and you need to think about how forthcoming your customer would be with somebody doing this kind of an interview at your company, from your company, versus somebody who is not at your company, who they have no relationship with, so they can say anything. Do you know what I mean? They open up more, generally speaking, to a third party. That's probably the biggest plus.
Okay, great. This is I think a very important point. And I have a question here from Cynthia. She asked in the opposite way, how you can convince your C-level, your top management to go for a win-loss program? How would you advise her to go for support in the top management?
Well, I would share those couple of slides I had early on, you know, that those who do win-loss over time have a 15 to 30% improvement in their win rates. That's one I would use. And, you know, the fact that there's a lot of companies that aren't doing it means that you ought to be doing it, because you'll get intelligence they don't get. You know, a lot of companies are arrogant, though. What was the other one? Now I've already forgotten it. I've got to go back to my share screen. Wait a minute. Let's just go back to it and share and move this up here. Sorry. Let's do slideshow. Yeah. Slideshow. From the beginning. Yeah, because it was right towards the beginning. And I'm just getting old, so I forgot this one here. Because a lot of times the executives say, oh, well, our salespeople are telling us the answers, and you might share with them this screen. Well, yeah, they do. But if you're losing, a lot of times what sales is telling you is not accurate. So I would take these statistics and share them. These two in particular, but especially this one. A lot of people are really taken in by the win rates. But the other thing that it does is it helps you retain business as well. And customers actually appreciate win-loss in a way, and I never call it win-loss. I ask if you're willing to have a conversation about this. Win-loss seems so, unless people are very familiar with it, a lot of people aren't. I often ask them for a conversation. I'd like to have a conversation with you about this. And that way they know it's not a survey right away too. You know, I want to know what your feelings are, what your thoughts are. And they often will gush instead of being so inflexible and not telling you too much.
Good. We have other questions here. One is very interesting, Ellen, is regarding if the digital world. Do you think that there is any kind of adaptation for these win-loss analytics for the digital world, like you would say, any kind of comment for the analytics or so on? Do you see any merger or any kind of a possibility to one support the other, or I don't know, any kind of a digital tooling for doing that?
So I think what your question is, how does this work with the digital things we're doing in the company, like big data and stuff like that?
Kind of, I think
that's what the question is.
Can correct me, but I think that this is going to the direction.
Okay, well, I think they're actually a very good fit. Big data is really studying, and it's very important, studying your present tense and what's happening, your customer relationship management. And so you get all these ideas with lots of data, and it gives you trends and ideas.
Ellen, just a moment. I'd like to, my question was related with win-loss analytics. Instead of doing only analysis, but doing analytics together with win-loss analysis.
I guess I'm not quite following that question.
It's applying big data and information technology and statistics and decision engineering techniques to win-loss analysis related to e-commerce, to marketplace, digital platforms. You understand? Like an NPS score.
Understand. Yeah, I think it's better to leave win-loss analysis by itself and not try and push data, big data into it. I think they need to be used together, but not necessarily merged, because big data has lots of data points and win-loss analysis has very few data points, but it's very in depth. And what it gives companies that big data doesn't, and why you need both of them, is win-loss often gives companies what the customers are saying. Big data usually doesn't do that. And it also is kind of ethnographic, if you will. It's
okay, I know ethnographic.
But I think they're both important, but I'm not understanding why you'd want to merge them.
Yeah, it's because I'm a specialist in natural language processing also. So I can extract topics and meaning from text. So usually I can use these techniques also to generate insights.
So you would take the win-loss results and use NLP? Yes.
Also applying to, like, if you do a research, NPS score analysis with open questions, also you can analyze the text, the opinions of the people, and making scores with statistics.
You can do that. What I really find people value more in win-loss, though, is they're looking for quotes, they're looking for action, they're looking for qualitative analysis rather than quantitative analysis. Quantitative analysis is definitely part of it, but the qualitative is very important in win-loss. And so what you're proposing would be a nice base for it, but my customers, they want quotes, they want action. Yeah, they want the numbers, if that makes any sense.
Oh, this is great. I think that we have a great point there, I think, regarding the two words. There is many other questions here, if you don't mind.
Okay, Ellen. Well, go ahead. Yeah.
I think that we have here this Beto. He's saying how win-loss analysis is evolving. What is the emergent practice that you wish to see spread in the market in the upcoming years? What do you think about the evolution of the technique and how you see other techniques supported?
Well, I know it's evolving with a lot of consultants. They're putting it on software, for example, but they're still having people do the talking. And I think we have job security there, because the probing and the critical thinking that goes into win-loss, I don't see that changing. I don't see a computer doing that. I just don't. And so I think we have job security as far as win-loss analysis goes. I think the real issue with win-loss that worries me more is the customer over time going to be willing to give us the time for that interview? You know, that worries me more than anything else. I can see it evolving, though, over time, and in a lot of companies it's already kind of there, and that is where people use the results of win-loss analysis with other analyses they're already doing, or in those charts I was sharing, those last 6 areas, they are figuring out where can I share the results that are appropriate with different areas of the company. And I think that's going to expand even more over time, because people are trying to stay competitive, right?
Great. There is one question regarding how you can have the confidence of the sales department in order that to give you the chance to talk with their customer and have their allowance to talk about some sensitive issues regarding the sales process. And adding to that, I think that in this case, you already mentioned that, but do you see other favorite teams in the companies that could handle the interviews? You mentioned two of them, CI and project management, but there is Cynthia question also in the back asking who else could do it.
Well, probably marketing can do it. It's people who actually know how to interview and listen and ask questions and probe and use elicitation skills. They would be the people who could also do the win-loss. What was the first part of your question now?
The first part is how you get the confidence from the
confidence,
sales.
right. Okay, of sales. Yeah, in my case, people will introduce me to their sales people. And I sold for a living for a number of years. And so I can talk their talk. And that's very handy, you know. But within a company, getting that process going, you know, can be the challenge in terms of they often feel threatened that you're going to mess up their relationship, right? And when people hire me, they always tell their salesperson, well, she sold for 5 years, so she gets that. And as soon as I talk to them, they get that I get that. So that's helpful. But that first step before they would hire me is what I think the question is. And it needs to be that you show sales what it is you're planning to learn that's going to help them make a better living. You know, like we're looking for product development. We're looking to find information to help you with all the deliverables that you like, better proposals, for example, or better demos. You know, that's what we get out of win-loss interviews. And it's not what do you call it? We're not scoring you and your performance. That's not the primary goal of win-loss analysis. That's up to your boss. And the other thing is you need to gain their trust by saying, we're going to talk to you before we would talk to your customer, because sometimes the timing isn't right. And even though marketing gave us this list of 20 customers to call, for example, we will call you or email you, be in touch before we're in touch with your customer, because maybe you have another deal going, or maybe we got misinformed by marketing and the deal isn't even closed yet. The customer is still deciding. And that's the reason you really want to talk to sales before you call their customer.
Interesting.
And it builds trust.
Yeah, the matter of trust is a very important issue inside big companies. And we have we are full of questions here. I think that we could do some others related to this one. It sounds interesting here. Win-loss can be made with a net promoter score together. Do you see it is a possible match?
Well, win-loss is after the sale. It depends on when you're doing your net promoter score. Everybody does it a little bit differently. But the same person, in my opinion, should be looking at those analytics. Absolutely. I know the clients I have, they're looking at net promoter score as well as win-loss analysis. The net promoter score, it depends on how it's done. How well it fits in with win-loss. Win-loss is always a conversation. It's one-on-one. The net promoter score, it all depends, right? Ideally, it's one-on-one. Sometimes it's just in writing. It's not in person. But I just feel like every bit of information you can get about that customer, you're interested in that. So yes, net promoter score, voice of the customer, all that stuff that you can get. I even used to, when I was working in a corporation, I would work with our market research people and add a couple of competitive questions to their market research, you know, so we need to share that across. Absolutely.
And this is great. I think that to integrate information, it's always a great opportunity to get the net promoter score, understand it deeply with win-loss analysis. It's absolutely, I think, the way that it could be. I have a nice and interesting question from Beto. He's asking if there is room for improvement in order to make in the making or in the using of the win-loss analysis by the organizations? Do you see ways to make organizations use more this technique inside their own companies? How you would recommend to do that?
For companies to improve the win-loss?
No, to make it more often or to use it more often.
To use it more often? Well, they want to improve sales. That's one reason. But I'm not quite understanding the question.
If I got it right from Beto, he's asking what could be done else in order to make this win-loss analysis more popular inside the organization.
Oh, make it more popular. Oh, I see. Okay, I understand now. I didn't get it at first. I think the best way to do that is to give them the results of what people learn from win-loss analysis. You know, in my book, I give a lot of examples of what people have done as a result of doing win-loss analysis. And if they didn't do it, what they wouldn't have known, you know. And talking to colleagues is another thing, you know, within yourselves. More than half of you are in companies, according to what Vera was sharing very kindly before I gave the talk, are doing win-loss analysis. And I think one of the best things to do is to talk to each other and say, well, how did you make the sale in your company? You know, what was the thing that turned the tide? Because I know in the companies I've worked in, that seems to be what really works, is maybe just doing even 1 or 2 interviews and getting some really good meaty information from just 1 or 2 interviews and sharing it around. You know, even that can help promote it a bit.
I think that the use case of win-loss and how it could benefit, I think that's a great idea, Ellen. I have some other 2 that I would make in one. The question is, do I have to interview all my customers? How I can choose them, from Luciana, and also how often I should do it in my company, from I think this one is from Cynthia.
Okay, well, if you're just really looking at one issue, I'll say, you know, usually 20 interviews is enough, wins and losses, 10 and 10, if it's one issue, right? That's a rule of thumb. If you're looking at a lot of issues, then you have to decide, well, how many of these do I want to do? Because it does take time to set them up, although you can have 2 or 3 people doing the interviews, so, you know, you can get through them more quickly that way. And how often do you want to do it? Most companies like to do it quarterly. And after the quarter ends, they'll contact, or they'll do it in-house, or they'll contact me and say, well, these are the 5 sales we want you to talk to this month, or this from this quarter. And I try to get through to people within about a month to 3 months after the sale is concluded. However, now with COVID, we have to be realistic. You know, there was a period of time where people were too freaked out, you know, so I had 3 or 4 months where I made no win-loss calls. I tried to get through to a few people, and I realized this is not good. So I told my customers, we just have to hold off for a few months. People are freaking out. Their children are at home. They're trying to educate their kids. They're trying to work, and they're scared. So I know I interviewed someone where the deal closed in December of last year. I just interviewed them 2 weeks ago. This is COVID. This is how it is. You know, another one, I think they closed it right around when COVID, in April. And I just talked to them a week or 2 ago, you know. So you have to be very flexible today and empathetic with people when you're deciding how often you're going to talk to them and when, and how soon after the sale. But ideally, they remember more a month or between a month and 3 months later. And it also depends on what you're assessing. Is the primary goal of doing your win-loss analysis to assess how well sales did? What was the pre-sales experience? You know, how did you make your decision? If you're going down that route, then sooner after the sale is better. Because what I noticed happened with both of the phone calls I was in is I heard a lot about implementation. And my company, while they're interested in implementation, that was not the focus of the interview. But guys, your system's implemented. They're going to tell me about it, you know? And some people, they want to call later on because they actually do want to hear about implementation. So it comes back to the step one. What is your goal in doing the win-loss? What are you really trying to learn? Does that make sense?
A lot of sense, yeah.
Okay.
This great explanations that people are giving a lot of congratulations for your speech, Ellen. Just to finalize, because I think that we are reaching our time here. I think I had a good one from George. He wants to know more, and I would like that you finish your discussion or presentation, give you a hint of how a person could start it. How would recommend for the people that are listening to us today, how they could go on. They start with their first win-loss or starting to use a technique, and later on to finalize, to put some reference of other books that you would recommend for people to read. That is the question from George.
Okay. Well, I think the steps that I outline in my presentation are a good start, and I have written a book about it. And really, my book is the only book that goes into win-loss in that much detail. That's the reason I wrote it. There's another book called Win-Loss Analysis, From a Good Sales Call to a Great Sales Call. And it's actually about win-loss analysis also. And but it's not very well written. And, you know, it had some good charts in it, but as I read it, they had an editor and everything, but they didn't do a very good editing job. I found it hard to follow. But that's the only other book that is a full book on win-loss analysis out there on the marketplace that I know of. Now, there's other books like, I've got my bookshelf here, so let's see here. Some of these, this goes into it a little bit. Okay. All right. That's my book, right? I don't have a copy of the other book I just mentioned, From a Good Sales Call to a Great Sales Call. Now, if you just want something quick and dirty, on the other hand, though, you want to learn about more competitive intelligence analytic tools, this is probably the easiest book to read, Analysis Paralysis. It's Babette Bensusan and Craig Fleischer. And they've written 3 books, and any of them are great. The other one, I'd say, wait a minute, that's, yeah, Business and Competitive Analysis, sorry. That's their more detailed book, and it's an upgrade to their first version, so I won't confuse you with it. Okay, this is the other one. That's an easier book to read, and also, it's the sort of book that it's the same authors here, Babette Bensusan and Craig Fleischer. What's good about this book is it's a thinner book, notice. It's also the kind of book you could get your boss to read, you know, if you're trying to explain competitive intelligence. I think it's a very easy book to read. And Babette was more behind it than Craig. Craig is more of an intellectual, so of course he's, you know, but Babette is very practical. And she said, you know, we need to have a book that anybody can read it, pick it up and read it quickly. And this book reads quickly, you know. Whereas these other books, you know, this is the earlier one that they did, they're more reference material, and they have a chapter on win-loss analysis within them, but they have lots of other analytic tools. So I would recommend this one first for other analytic tools, just because it's easier to read. And for a lot of you, English is not your first language, to say the least. So you might rather read a book that's easier to read, right? And whereas this one here, it's a very good book. It's less easy to read, but it's pretty awesome. I have it as reference material when I'm doing competitive intelligence projects, thinking, okay, what kind of analysis would fit this customer well? That's when this business and competitive analysis book comes in really handy. So I hope that helps.
Ellen, was a great sharing of your knowledge and all the techniques that you also present from the great Craig and Babette. They are also great authors in the topic. And you probably realize, George, that you are in the great companies that you could be talking about win-loss, that we are with the main author for this topic. And if you want to read more, I recommend you to get Ellen Naylor book that is a best-selling in this field.
Well,
Great,
thank
Ellen.
you. I appreciate your kind comments. And if anybody has other questions, I do have my contact information right there on that last slide. And I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Yeah, I think that we later on we can share. Ellen is very active also in LinkedIn. You can find her also there, and it's would be also a good opportunity to share some ideas and insights with her as well. I'm going to hand over to Luciana and Vera, and thank you, Ellen, for your insightful presentation today.
Well, thanks for having me. It was my pleasure. I just wish I could be in Brazil in person.
We also would be great.
I love your country and I love your people. So it's like, oh.
Ellen, thank you so much for your insightful presentation. And you're in our list of international visiting, yeah, for sure. For next year or you know, further years for sure. Christina is saying yes, right?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that would be super great. The theme you just enlightened us today super is connected with our students and even us as professors are studying. So in my field, I studied marketing, relationship marketing, and it's super interesting what you bring to us in terms of being studying in the trust theory. We saw a lot of you know, a synergy between win and loss analysis when you're talking about B2B marketing, for example, and how to analyze the things, how you conduct relationships between you know, companies, which is hard sometimes. So I invited you. I just published an article with a student. She's from pharmaceutical sector, and we studied just this relationship between customers in this field, which is something hard and difficult because there is much more related to confidence, how you really embark in this relationship to contract a new company, pharmaceutical, so with high technology, and you're considering hospitals or, you know, clinic. So it's a very nice, and it's in English. So I will hand out to you.
Oh,
and
send it to me. I'd love to read it.
Yeah.
Thank
And I saw lots of synergies between the trust theory and win analysis, you know, because there we just listed several factors that are connected to build trust between partners, to build partnerships between seller and, you know, the other part. So, well, something to begin the conversation.
Absolutely,
so
Luciana.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's just a thing to start the conversation, but I'm sure that among our professors, you have much more to talk, I'm sure. Well, I think we have to finish. I'm so sorry. That's it, Vera. I don't know if someone wants to address one more questions. Vera?
Thank you, Vera.
Tá me ouvindo?
Well, yeah, I'm hearing you. I wanted to thank Ellen Naylor for the amazing insights she gave to us and for incorporating all the items we've asked for, and also for all the conversation we have had since July. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. I should be saying obrigada, right?
Sure.
Yeah, you know, Vera, we know already she's a really good listener, right?
Yes.
So thank you so much. I would like to thank also everyone that stayed with us. And I would like to take a picture, the final picture for everybody, you know. If you want, if you could open up your camera, and then we take a picture. Yeah. Let's do it. Shift command.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Here you
I'm gonna
go.
do that too.
Yeah. Yeah, they were there, right? Yeah, great people. Okay.
Oh, that's fun.
Okay. I think I got it. No, just one more. Don't escape from me. Wait a minute. Okay. Good. Thank you, people. Thank you so much. That's it. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you.
I hope to see you soon in Brazil.
Oh, I hope so too. I would love that. My husband too. He loves Brazil.
Yeah, great.
All righty. Thanks again.
Obrigada, Vera.
Obrigada a você.
Yes, obrigada, Vera. She's both of you organizers. Luciana,
Okay.
too.
Yeah, foi muito bom. It's very nice. 2 dias muito bons.
Sem dúvida.
Parabéns pela organização, pelo evento, maravilhoso. Congratulations. So see you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Tchau, todos.
Tchau,
Tchau.
tchau.